This time I want to talk a little bit about something like this here. Of course, this what I show here is completely confusing and it doesn't really work. It illustrates only how dependent we are on the right perspective to the things. And when we move, it unveils maybe the shape of an object or not. As we have seen here from the start, it was more confusing because we had no idea that we look inside. In the moment you know that, it looks already different because our brain flips then and gives us exactly the right way. Try it again, go back to the start and look again. Anyway, seriously, what I want to explain here is, of course, one major concern that we should have always when we do things like camera projection, or if we model a box like this in detail, where we get every single little edge here in polygons. Tons of time, tons of work, and on the end, maybe we don't need that at all. And so the next step is, of course, camera mapping, that we take all the details that have here already a nice perspective on the box and give only the illusion of that. Of course, this box here is finally maybe just in the middle ground of our scene, and we have people moving in front of it or so, and there's not so much attention to it. So cinematography, or as I would call it, how to lead the audience eyes, is here a very important skill set to have. So you know exactly what is needed and what is not needed. When I look from this side, I have done this before, I can see here, of course, problems. And you can see here, now it works. So what is really needed to get the illusion and what is not needed? For that, I want to go with you, of course, with a camera here into the game. And I want to move the camera always a little bit further away until we have maybe the illusion that even an image would be sufficient. And I'll show you an example of that, of course, in a second. And when we talk about moving the camera, then I have, of course, in mind that we don't use anything of the projection camera, only here the camera that is now named close. And with a command click and drag, I copy here this camera, and we have now exactly the same target inside. The target is inside the box, and I want to show you that here, of course, from the top view. And I have to click here on H to get only the object, and then I see after a while the camera, if I make that visible. So here we have now here our animation path, and the idea is that I move the camera always exactly from one to the next point. That means the same distance each time, but I stay focused from the start here on the box. And later on I want to move the target then towards the camera to get maybe a similar rotation here. For that I need, of course, then this tool here. This is not longer in the main menu, it's the animation tool, and you can find this here in Customer and Customize commands. And when you go here to animate, then you find exactly this tool here, translates the animation curve in the viewport. So this needs only to be dragged then here to this field, and it stays there for the session. And if you save your startup, then finally here in the customization as save as startup layout, then it stays there perhaps forever. Okay, so let's get started. And the first idea is, of course, we check again how this looks here. When we have a camera that is that close to the box, then I would say for sure we need a 3D object here, because this side here on the left changes dramatically and this side here on the right changes dramatically, as you can see. And of course the lid on top is in a similar way important here for the idea that we move the camera through space. So when I scale this now down and I go to my other camera here, my copy, and I switch this camera on, I stay here in my animate tool, or in my tool translate the animation curve in the viewport tool. And then I can go here and just move this here wherever I like, and you see it stays here around the target. And maybe I went a little bit too far. So when I go now and play the animation in this window, the view is nearly not visible in terms of change in parallax. So I go a little bit closer. And I have to activate this again. So you can see this is nearly not visible in the background, of course, now. And imagine that something in the foreground happens. Maybe a police car runs around, or we have a helicopter flying in, or just an actor moving from A to B. When I say, okay, we want to have the same scale in it, then I crank up here maybe my focal length and get this bigger in the picture, so we have something that compares more. And we have the same movement of the camera in terms of distance, but we have a larger distance between camera and object. And you can see the change here is now not as dramatically as it was before, as we had this one here. So the closer the camera is to an object, the more we have a change here. So let's do this one more time, and I select here my camera, go with Command or Control, and drag this down to get another camera. This time I have this camera here, and I want to move this even further away. So I stay here just without animation. I stay in my animate the path, or move the path. It's a long name. Translate the animation curve in the viewport tool. Okay, so I move this here. And maybe I have to move it even a little bit down because it gets a little bit high now. That would be then a bird's eye view instead of what we had before. Switch the camera on. And again, I go here and increase the focal length here in terms of longer. And when I see this in the right way, this is not even enough. So now we have a super long telelens. And when I start the timeline here, I can't really see any movement here. It's a little bit, tiny bit. But to be honest, if that is in the background, and again, with all the stuff that you might have in the foreground, this might be nearly invisible. And so an image of this box in the right perspective would be maybe already sufficient. And that could be just on a plane. Just one single polygon if you like, and that saves of course a lot of time. Always keep in mind it is a scene dependency, and that means here how far is the camera away from the object, how prominent is the object in the picture, and is it really something where the audience put the eye on, or is it just a background and it supports the whole scene. And when we go a little bit further with all these explorations, then I want to introduce you here to my little sky object. And you might have asked yourself, what is that finally here? And I want to open this, of course, for you, so you see exactly what it is. And it is the panorama that we have used in the integration series. I have two of these, of course. This is a little bit bluish, but the main idea here is, of course, just to show you what's all about. And this is an image. That means we have no geometry to support here any parallax information. It's just wrapped around the sky, so nothing very specific. And when I go here now and we take the first camera and I let go here of the play button, then you can see here that we get a lot of parallax information from the box, but anything in the scene here, it looks not wrong, but we get no parallax change here. Parallax would be, for example, the camera moves a little bit and this palm tree here should move differently than the background. But have you noticed that in that short second where I showed it? When I show you that now again, because I've pointed it out, you might think, that is not really correct. But keep in mind, this becomes all now motion blur on top of that, and you have in the foreground something going on with an actor or maybe a little spaceship or whatever. And so the combination out of all these movements is so huge and complex that we agree in the moment we see that maybe much easier to a flat background to something that gives me here in parallax and gives me the illusion everything is fine. Let's check out the other camera. So I check this here on, if it would let me. Okay, this is a little bit too high now, so I think I get nearly no information here. So I have to adjust the camera in Y. And I have to click here and put this down. I think that's maybe a good idea, but I want to see a little bit from the lid. And I let go of it and make this big. And you can see here already the background is so far off that we agree immediately based on the long lens here that it works. Let's use a standard lens maybe, and there's not so much change in the background that we would miss any parallax. So if that box goes into the background, it can be easily just a picture. And I think I repeat myself here already. Let's check out this camera, and this needs to go also in the Y value a little bit lower. And I stay here in my animation tool, so I can do this just like that. And again. Now we have, with that super long lens here, 310 millimeter for a full frame, we have here nearly nothing left in the background that would give any parallax away. And we see pixels here already. That means the whole texture here with 7,000 pixels wide is absolutely not sufficient. Anyway, we could go here, of course, and crank this up to 64 megabyte to get a little bit more details here in, or render the whole thing. But you see already, you see the chromatic aberration in the picture, which is minimal for a fisheye of that size here. So the next step was, of course, I wanted to see how it works when the box goes really into the background. That means the camera itself has a longer distance to it, and the target point is not inside of the box, which is at the moment the case. And one problem that all produced is, of course, in the moment I rotate the camera around the box becomes a central point and a lot of attention. From a cinematography point of view, this would be, of course, not the ideal if you want to have the attention to a foreground actor or something else. So we have to set up here now a scene that the camera is not rotating around this, and I will do this, and I'm back in a second when all of that is set up. So two little examples, and maybe a little bit borderliney. So I go here with this image here, and I have created here now a background rendering with the box inside. It's not very well integrated. It's very visible that the box is an alien here, but you can see here it just moves very nicely, and you don't even miss that the box isn't rotating at all here. Okay, so this is one example with a static background, and I have animated the camera as before. You can see that there is a parallax between these two guys because they are really positioned in space. But one of these boxes here is just an image, one is a 3D box, as our camera projection is. Which one is it? Can you see it? I can't. I can't. And we go to the next example. And the boxes are exactly the same. One is an image, one is 3D, the camera projection. And this time I have moved the background even with it. But this time I rotate only the camera. And that is sometimes also a very quick method to get something done. Can you see any difference? No. Okay, so let's solve that problem here. And you can see here immediately which one is the 3D box. This one here is the box that we can rotate, and whatever we do, it gives us more parallax. This box here, when we rotate this, it becomes very flat. Not possible. But after a certain distance, that's not really visible, and based on a camera move, that can help us to get away with a simple image instead of a 3D box. Always based on the scene dependencies that you have, camera distance, what you want to have in a scene, what is in the foreground, and all of these parameters play into the game. I hope I was able to give you some ideas where to think about when you build up a scene like this, what is really needed, what is maybe not needed, and of course it's always you, the artist, who has to have an idea, the creativity, and of course the analytic mind, what is finally needed. I could give you here only a hint. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye bye.